My name is Daniel Harper, and I used to work as a night security guard at an old city morgue on the outskirts of the small town of Haywood, Illinois. The town is small, quiet, with abandoned streets drowning in weeds and empty houses, occasionally alternating with rented families who stay here for no more than a year. I'll be honest, I never believed in anything supernatural, didn't believe in God, wasn't superstitious, wasn't afraid of the dark. I've worked night shifts for almost 10 years, and I've seen enough to know that people's imaginations are scarier than any reality. I accepted the job at the morgue simply because it paid well. Night shifts, a minimum of people, peace, no one distracts. It seemed like the perfect place to sit on camera, drink cheap coffee, and watch videos on your phone. The morgue was old. A 2-story building with peeling plaster and black stains of dampness on the walls. It was built back in the 40s of the last century, but it has never seen renovations. Real renovations. The floor creaked. The wiring was pulled back in the 60s, and the doors did not like the wind so much that they rattled with every breath of the night. But despite this abandonment, I was never afraid there. Until that night. The night that broke me. After her, I stopped being myself. I may sound like a lunatic right now, but I'm saying these words from the place where I'm being held now. The Cook County Psychiatric Hospital. And even though they tell me that everything I saw was a hallucination, I know it's a lie, because what lives within the walls of the old Haywood morgue doesn't want anyone to tell the truth. Nevertheless, I will tell. Any of you ever have to drive past that morgue, just don't stop. Not under any circumstances. The night started as usual. At 12 o'clock I took over the shift. Everything seemed normal. Another book, cameras on monitors, a thermos with coffee. Deafening silence after the day staff closed the door behind them. They left on the table the reports of 3 new bodies that had been brought in during the day. 2 elderly people and 1 man in his 40s who had died in an accident. All 3 were already lying in the refrigerators of the morgue, covered with sheets. After the briefing and door check, I just sat and waited. Everything looked normal. Even too normal. Around 1 in the morning I heard the first sound, but then I didn't pay attention. It was almost imperceptible, as if someone had swiped a finger across a metal table. Something always knocks, clicks, creaks in the morgue, or old pipes, coolers, ventilation. But 20 minutes later the sound repeated, and this time it was clearer, as if someone knocked once, paused for a long time, then knocked again. I put down a cup of coffee, leaned closer to the monitors. The cameras showed the same thing as always. Empty corridors, a room with metal tables, a dark room with refrigerators for bodies, and yet the sound came from the morgue. I took the flashlight, sighed, and went to check. I wasn't a coward. That's impossible in my line of work. But something worried me even then. Perhaps it was an unusual silence. Usually something rustles, blows, clicks in the building at night. But now, as if the whole morgue froze. There was a faint smell in the corridor, sour, mixed with the smell of old disinfectants. It was always there, but it was sharper that night. I entered the first room. Silence. Then in the second. Everything's calm. Finally in the third, the one where the refrigerators were. It seemed to me that the blows came from there. I went in, shined a flashlight. The white sheets on the bodies did not move. Closets are tightly closed. Nothing on the floor. I stood there for a few minutes and was about to leave when I heard a sound from the farthest closet to the left, quiet but clear. Scraped like a nail on metal. I froze listening. A chill ran down my back. Reason says, probably the cooling pipe, the old iron shrinks. But how smooth and slow that scraping sounded. No, it wasn't iron. I went to that closet, touched the handle. The metal was cold, but that's normal. It's a refrigerator. I wanted to open it, but at that moment the sound stopped. Dead silence, as if someone inside realized that I was standing next to me. I opened the door. Inside was a middle-aged man, the one who died in a road accident, a twisted, battered body, but it was motionless. Everything looked normal, as for a morgue. "Daniel, you've had enough," I muttered to myself. "Ghosts don't exist." I closed the cupboard. I turn around and leave. And just at that moment there was a sound. Behind. In the same closet I just closed. 3 clear blows from the inside. Bam! 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 I froze. I wasn't breathing. My heart was beating so hard I couldn't hear it in my ears. I slowly turned around and grabbed the handle again. But when I opened the closet a second time, the body was lying the same way. Immovable. But one thing has changed. The man's eyes were open. I don't remember how I got back to the security room. Just stood there, closing the door and breathing heavily. I started the cameras in full screen mode, looked at the monitor, but nothing strange happened. Maybe it seemed to me, maybe stress, lack of sleep, coffee. But I knew it wasn't. I saw those eyes looking at me, right at me. It was about 2 a.m. when the second one started, and that was much worse. First I heard the sound of ventilation, a high-pitched, shrill whistling sound, as if someone was stuck or crawling inside a mine. I thought it might be opossums. The building is old, things happen, but the whistling turned into wheezing, in heavy convulsive breathing, like in a person. Breathing echoed throughout the ventilation, rolled through the corridors, echoed in every room. I turned up the sound of the cameras and heard it go off every 10 to 20 seconds. A clear, heavy inhalation, and then a long, drawn-out exhalation, as if through a compressed throat. Inhale. You and gone. Each time I felt this breath getting closer, I left the room holding the lantern in front of me. The corridor was dark because the motion sensors did not work. I walked a few meters. The sensors did not cut the light. I pointed the lantern out upwards towards the ventilation grills. Nothing. But the breath wasn't just close anymore. It was right over my head. Inhale. Suddenly, something hit the grate from above. Bright metallic sound. The grill bent inward, as if someone inside who clearly shouldn't be there rested their hands, or something that looked like hands, and pushed. I jumped back. The sound that came out of my mouth was not human. I have never screamed like that. I rushed back to the security room, closed the door, took the table under the handle. Cameras immediately began to interfere. The image jumped, flickered. I saw something on one of the cameras in the corridor. At first, I thought it was a person high, very high, thin, unnatural. A shadowy figure without a face, but with what looked like hollows where the eyes were. She stood at the end of the corridor, motionless. Then she sharply tilted her head to the side, at an angle of 40 degrees, like a broken mannequin. I saw dead bodies. I saw decomposition. I saw deaths and bloody accidents. But this was another level. The figure took a step. The camera flashed. She became closer. One more step. The camera went to a black screen. When the image returned, she was already at the door. By the door of my room. She was standing behind the door. I couldn't see her directly, only through the camera, but that was more than enough. The figure was almost as tall as the ceiling, too thin, as if the bones were covered with dried skin. She bent her head to the doorknob itself, as if she was listening, as if she could hear me breathing. The camera jumped on the screen. Obstacles appeared for a second, and at that moment, between frames, this creature did not move, but managed to get even closer. Now her head was touching the door itself from the inside, and the dark sockets where her eyes were directed directly at me. Through the monitor, I couldn't move. It seemed to me that if I moved even a finger, she would hear. And then the door handle began to slowly lower. Slower than a human hand would do, silently, as if something soft, crunchy is being pulled. I pushed myself into the chair so hard that I felt my knees hit each other. No, no, I whispered, even though I knew it was useless. The handle stopped. She stood motionless for several seconds. Then there was a sharp jerk, so strong that the table I used to support the door shuddered. I wanted to scream, but my voice disappeared. It was as if the air had become thick, viscous. The figure on the camera suddenly disappeared. She simply ceased to exist in the frame. But I knew that she hadn't left. She just stopped showing up in the video. Something began to scratch softly on the door, not with claws. No, this is how the claws of animals do not scratch. It was a sound that could have made something softer. Muscles, tendon, fingers without nails. Scratch, scratch, then a stop, then again. At this moment, all the cameras on the monitors simultaneously began to distort the picture. In one cell, bodies under sheets rose and fell as if breathing. On the other, the refrigerator doors opened by themselves, slowly and creakingly. On the third, I saw one of the corpses sitting on the table and looking at the camera with wide, open white eyes. It can't be, I repeated in my mind. It's impossible. Impossible. But it was. The morgue was suddenly plunged into darkness. All the lights went out at the same time. The screens of the cameras crackled, turned black. And at the same moment I heard a sound. Not breathing, not steps, not scraping. Laughter. Quiet. Hollow, like the laugh of an old man whose lungs are half burned. Laughter rang out from several directions at once. First the case, then on the left. Then he heard himself through the overhead ventilation. I pushed the table away from the door. I didn't think, I just acted. He pulled the handle on himself and ran out into the dark corridor. There was no light, none. The corridors stretched in black tunnels, like the entrails of a huge beast. I was shining a lantern. My hands were shaking so that the beam went along the walls in zigzags. On the floor, there was something. Water? No. Sticky, thick liquid. I didn't look to see which one it was. Didn't want to know. I ran before leaving, to any output. But when I turned into the main corridor, I stopped so suddenly that I hit the wall with my shoulder. Someone was standing at the end of the corridor. It wasn't the silhouette from the camera. It was a man. Old. In a white doctor's coat, which was so dirty that it seemed. He was lying on the ground. His skin was grey and his eyes. No eyes. Just two black holes with blood trails around them. He was facing me, still. And I got to know him. It was Dr. Maurice Randall, the director of this morgue since the 1970s. But he died in 1998. His photo still hangs at the entrance. The old man slowly raised his hand and pointed a bony finger at me. And then something bigger began to stir behind him in the darkness. Something that could not be human. I rushed to the side, to bypass, but the corridors of the morgue changed. They were no longer what they used to be. I remembered the plan of the building. I had walked there hundreds of times, but now doors were appearing where they shouldn't have been, and passages were disappearing. I didn't know how that was possible, but I saw it happen. I ran into the room with the metal tables. The tables stood in a chaotic order, as if someone had moved them. I pushed the door behind me, pushed the heavy table, and stood in the corner, trying not to breathe. I heard something coming slowly and heavily past the door in the hallway. The steps were not human-like, as if something was dragging long limbs behind it. Something heavy, something that clung to the floor. The footsteps stopped at the door silence. Then something hit them. Not hard, but as if sniffed. I heard a deep, raspy breath and a long, drawn-out exhalation. It was looking for me. The flashlight began to flicker. I hit him with the palm of my hand, but to no avail. The light went out, and at the same moment, the sheets that were lying on the nearest table began to rise, as if someone was moving under them. The sheet slowly slid to the floor, and a hand rose from under him, dried up blue with long fingers. I wanted to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. That body slowly sat down, turning its head in my direction. But the worst thing is not that. Hands also began to rise from under the other sheets. One, the second, the third. They rose all together, as if someone had given a signal. Their fingers clenched and unclenched, as if someone had forgotten what movement was. Yesterday I moved to the wall. Something pressed on the door again. The metal curved inwards, then back. It was as if something huge was breathing and pressing on them. At the same time, bodies began to fall off the tables. Slow. Not sure. Like dolls that have just been given life. I did not leave the room. I didn't run away. I lost the ability to move, and then the door fell inward along with the iron frame. What went inside was not of this world. A tall, twisted creature with thin arms down to the knees, head twisted to one side, empty deep sockets instead of eyes, mouth very wide, up to the ears, with a pit of resin instead of teeth. It didn't work. It seemed to slide. His body trembled slightly, as if something stirred inside. Behind him stood the old doctor. He raised his hand as if pointing at me. Again. "Don't touch me," I whispered. And then the creature tilted its head and smiled. I don't remember what happened after that. I remember only the sound, bones cracking, and the cold that covers from head to toe, and darkness. I did not wake up in a morgue, not at home, not in the emergency room. And in the Cook County Psychiatric Unit, I was told that the security guard who replaced me had been found in the morning. The morgue door was wide open. All inventory is turned upside down, refrigerators are open, cameras are off. And I was found in the middle of the corridor, covered in blood, sitting on the floor repeating the same things. He was looking at me. He was lurking. The doctors say that I did everything myself, that I had a disorder, panic, hallucinations, that the morgue was old, the doors could fall, the pipes could make noise. They speak logically, but every night, when the lights are turned off in the ward, I hear his breathing in the ventilation. I hear him waiting. And I know what lives in that morgue is still there. And one day it will come for me.